Excellent. Okay, man.
Teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. To my regular listeners, you guys have come to expect this. You already know what it's about. And again, we are here to serve you in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Today, I have a guy named Trent M. Clark who is going to come in and light this microphone on fire. The synergy and the way the work he does in regards to leadership, in regards to taking what sports teaches naturally and applying it to you guys as business owners and listeners and how you can apply it to your specific team in business. It's right in line with what we're all about, what we've been all about for the past 5 years. So all that being said, Trent, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Aswan. I am thrilled to be here, and I'm going to look to move swiftly. We talked a little football pre-talk, man. I appreciate that, bringing back to the tailback days, and I want to move swiftly. That's what I want to do.
Well, before we get started, because you're a Detroit guy, I gotta ask you, are you a Michigan Wolverines fan?
I am not a Detroit guy, first of all. I'm a Michigan guy. I grew up in Battle Creek, Michigan, which is kind of, southwest
Mm-hmm.
central there. And I was a longtime Michigan fan growing up. And then I went and coached with Nick Saban at Michigan State. And my alliances shifted. Let's just say that, Aswan.
All right. Well, you're good here because this is a you're talking to a diehard Michigan Wolverines fan, like absolute
Nice.
diehard. And the reason I love them so much is because when I was a kid, I played football and the uniforms we had were the wing helmets. So I've developed a
Oh,
loyalty to them through the App State loss, through everything. So before you guys start talking about he's a bandwagon guy, I lived through some rough years as a Michigan football fan. So it feels good to call us the national champions as of this recording. Again, I get that's me sort of looking in the past, but still,
yeah.
I want to bask in that as long as I'm never going to get tired of saying that. So, all that being said, and you kind of mentioned you working with Nick Saban and when he was the Spartans and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious when it comes to your background and how you grew up because one of the things I've been consistent in saying as a football guy is I've always been jealous of how baseball has a proper feeder system. As players coming up, there's, triple A, double A, whatever it is, and you get moved up. And right now, football does not have that feeder system. And I've always kind of looked at your sport from a distance as how a football player may develop versus how a baseball player may develop when they can. Now I'm actually in Palm Beach where I'm seeing a bunch of the feeder franchises and seeing how well they connect with the community. So, to get started off, how was like things growing up for you, being, the sports guy that you are and all that kind of stuff? Kind of dive into your background a little bit.
Yeah. So first of all, played both sports a lot, right?
You did
So
football and baseball?
very football and baseball, yeah. And so very different, right? And I think you make a good point about the feeder system.
Right.
The road to baseball is a long, arduous road. I mean, I think the one really thing I really like about football is that there's like three steps. Like be a really good high school football player, be a really good college player, and like be a really good pro player, right? And the challenge is that those gaps between those three things are massive, right? From high school to college, especially like a D1, it's a major shift. And then,
I'm glad you said it.
even
Listen, this isn't me. I mean, you guys
yeah,
regularly probably tired of hearing me. So I'm glad somebody else, a baseball guy,
yeah.
come on and and by the way, it was 10 years with pro baseball with the Detroit Tigers that you
So
coached.
I spent over 12 years, 13 years about in pro ball where I coached for the Detroit Tigers, I coached for the Cleveland Indians, and then I coached for the Los Angeles Angels.
So
So I
thank
have
you.
two of the rings on
With
today.
rings, okay, this guy knows his shit. He's validated the point I've made for years at this point. So thank you so much, Trent, for making that point. Football people, a feeder system for the life of me. How many other quarterbacks? I mean, we talked about Michigan. JJ McCarthy's out for the season. You have a feeder system. These kinds of things will happen. But anyway, let's not get started there because I would go on a tangent when it comes to that. I'll let
Yeah.
you kind of continue.
Well, and there's major challenges, right? Like the very difference of the two is that while baseball's a long, arduous physical season, it's more mentally tough. It's still physically strong because it's every day for so long. Football, it's like you go hard for a week and you recover. But even my experience going from high school into a Big Ten setting,
Mhm.
with that was massive. I mean, you realize like we have this depth chart and players are going to play. Like if you're third on the depth chart by like week 5 in the Big Ten, you are very likely active, because all of a sudden it's like Aswan's our number 1, and he went down week 2 against Ohio State. And then Trent came in at number 2, was doing okay. And then we ran into the Michigan State game, and that's a bloodbath. So that's that. So now we got Penn State this weekend. Hey, Jimmy, you're in. So if you've been jacking around on reps in practice and everything else, like you're going to embarrass yourself on Saturday, and it's not going to go well for you, and you're likely to get hurt.
Yeah, that's a strong point. So you kind of already kind of mentioned this. I interrupted you when you're talking about your background. So you played football all the way until college, or was it baseball? What was the school?
I played both baseball. Baseball was my number 1 sport. Tennis was my number 2 sport. I played both those at a Division I school. And I played football, and I played basketball until I was about a sophomore. I broke my leg playing football when I was 13 or 14 years old. And came back, played still, and loved it. Did not end up playing my last 2 years in high school because the baseball thing was getting so heavy. 3 state championships in a row at my high school. We were highly recruited and highly regarded as a USA Today Super 25. And so that was rare in Michigan, right, to have teams. And so I got this focus in like, hey, I'm a little dude. I'm like 5'6". Like I played at like 175. So, you know, in high school, I was probably playing like 150 maybe. Like, I mean, I'm out there getting killed. And you know what I missed as one, like growing up, I had these coaches, and God love them. You know, they were, you know, fight, be tough, love them. And it was fight for that extra yard. And I would go in, hit guys, be in a pack of 3. Someone's got a hold of an arm, someone's got a hold of a sleeve. And I'm watching this dude who's like twice my size lining me up from 25 yards, which I'm going to get hit in about 4 seconds, right? Maybe 2. And depending on how fast he is. And I'm taking these blows regularly, and I'm like going, and then about 2 years after I was out of college, this nice runner named Barry Sanders came on the scene, and I was like, he ducks in under when guys are going to crush him. He actually steps out of bounds when it just looks like, hey, this isn't going any further. I'll live another day. I'll hit a quick scat and grab an extra 2-3 yards and take a bump out of bounds. And I was like, hey, anyone else like see this guy? Like, coaches, please watch this guy and train your backs accordingly, because I was not trained that way.
Yeah. And for you, if you're listening in and you're having a difficult time following along, he's talking about the tailback position in football, guys. He's talking about defenders and making the business decision to go down, because even as you're talking, as you're bringing that up, and we're going to sort of, I guess, kind of transition, the position isn't even as valued as it used to be, because of the fact that you have to do multiple things, and you can't just be that guy that's running. You have to be able to get passes out the backfield. You got to be able to move in the slot. I was actually thought Christian McCaffrey should have been the number 1 player because of how many things he can do. And as as you're going through this, you're obviously able to transition a career, or your athletic playing career, into a situation where you're coaching, but also becoming a speaker, international speaker at that, and speaking, I believe you said, like 17 different countries, something crazy like that, which is amazing. Can you speak a little bit about how you were able to transition all the lessons that you obviously learned into a framework or a way of, explaining that to crowds of people and speaking on it in kind of an eloquent way and all that stuff? Because that's a challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge. First of all, I had a couple huge advantage as one that I didn't really realize I had going in, right? I was in theater, and I was in like Glee Club in high school, right? Yeah, I was like the athlete in Glee Club, man. Like, you know how that goes. Like, that's not like a popular position.
Oh man, I gotta pause you there. All right, athletes, because this makes me think of something my dad told me to do when I was in high school. My dad told me, look, join the debate team. And I'm like, I am a football player. I'm a captain on my team. I am not about to join no damn debate. He goes, look, if you want to develop as a public speaker, you want to articulate yourself in a public setting and get your point across, join the debate team. By the time I left high school, I was actually going and paying for my own public speaking classes because of what my pops told me. So I'm glad you brought that up too, man. That's a big deal, man.
my kids have done debate. They go through the CC program, classical
Yeah.
conversations, homeschooling our kids. They have a big debate program.
Yeah.
And adults meet my 13 to 15-year-old kids and go, holy cow, like
Yeah.
what's up? And they look them in the eye, they shake hands, they
Yeah.
know how to create an argument, they know how to make a point, and they're like, what's up with this kid? And I'm like, oh, debate, man. Like you've
Excellent.
got to learn how to speak publicly in front of people, make an argument. So
Yeah.
this is like, it's great training. I wish I had taken debate. I think it would have been awesome. But I think that, and I was this entrepreneurial guy from the beginning, from the time I had paper routes when I was like, 10, 12 years old, right up through. So I just had these insights of how I was going to do things. And then, man, I played on some big stages as an athlete. And then I started coaching on these big stages. And so, it's funny, as when you win a World Series, or you go to the World Series, all of a sudden you're the smartest guy in the room, and it's funny because I love to talk about 1999, where we turned things around with the Los Angeles Angels. We made a huge commitment to build a winning team, right?
Right.
To get these leading winning teams.
Right.
And the Cleveland Indians made a big commitment before 1995 in their first World Series. So you start thinking about like 92, 93, 94. Those are the years where you put your head down and get it all done. And everyone goes, yeah, they're not that good at 500. But I'm like, yeah, but we're coming. Like, we're coming for people. Like, people don't know what we have lined up. In Cleveland, we had 8 future All-Stars in our minor league program that never played a full season in Cleveland because we traded them away and they became All-Stars for other teams.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're sitting there developing this top-tier talent. You could see it progressing, and you could see it. We are positioning, so important, positioning for the next best thing. And so I was always positioning me of like, hey, how am I going to speak? And then, of course, when you do have some success, everyone wants you to talk about your success and what a great year. And I tell a lot of people, 1999 was a great year that nobody knew about us, but it set the framework for the 2002 World Championship.
Well, just for clarity too, because again, something I've been on the record for saying multiple times, you were the strength coach, right? And the strength,
I was a strength and conditioning coach and coordinator. Yep.
The strength coach is always kind of the missing piece to a lot of programs, because you get your X's and O's guys, and I'm telling you, even in the pros, it's probably like this. Actually, definitely is like this in a way. You get your team that's responsible for bringing money in. You get your X's and O's guys, but then you get that strength department that's responsible for developing the talent. And you're able to start to see the plug, see the hole, see the minors guys that are developing what they're going to need, who they're just going to trade away because of money. So you're getting kind of a huge scope of the entire organization. And you're able to, like you mentioned, you're an entrepreneur kind of at heart. You're able to apply a lot of these lessons towards, all right, what is it I'm going to do if need be, if I got to go branch out on my own, if the contract doesn't get renewed, all that sorts of things. So like you said, there's a lot of, really great, unique opportunities that you're able to take advantage of.
Yeah. I mean, one of the huge one was, my first business was really because of baseball, where I had been with the Tigers in 1993 and 94 with Sparky Anderson. And I was learning from a great U of M coach named Brad Andrus, who was hired in by Bo Schembechler when he was the general manager of the Detroit Tigers. And so I had this Michigan guy who we were figuring out, hey, how does baseball do it? Because we can't train like you're going to train football players. It's a very different deal, very different schedule. And you become very aware of that. And so my first business was, we hit the strike and 5 players asked me to move to Arizona and train them. So I had a private training business in the Arizona area, in the Phoenix area. And that was my first one. Then fast forward 2 years later, where after I go back to Michigan State and start coaching there, become a grad assistant, and I'm coaching and teaching at the university level at Michigan State, getting my graduate degree. And then I signed back with Cleveland, go to the World Series twice. And by 1997, I'm this guy who's really well known for getting athletes prepared for what's about to happen. And we also have this beautiful training facility in Jacobs Field at the time. And all the vendors and athletes start coming to me saying, hey, I'd like to outfit my whole off-season home because we have this walkout level of, 3,500 square feet, because who doesn't in a house that size when you make $20 million a year, right? And so it's like, hey, I'm going to do $100,000 of fitness equipment in my lower level to build this gym out so I can train when I'm at home. I said, I will do that for you, and I'll show you how to write it off on your taxes, because this is part of your job as a professional athlete. You will pay zero income tax on this, and this will all be a write-off for you towards your job. And they were like, I don't understand that. Please show me. And all of a sudden, I'm doing houses for Elvis Gearbach and you name athletes, and they were all calling me. And that was my new business, right? So I was like always kind of going on these things, man. Always.
And that's actually a very important point as well for the listeners. When it comes to starting a business, he did not say, hey, man, I got this great logo. Hey, man, I got this great website. It was all about servicing the people in a unique way, like buying some equipment and then figuring out how to get it from a tax write-off. And then the clients or the customers or the shareholders, whatever it is you want to call them, are going to start coming to you, and the word of mouth epidemic starts happening. That's how you build a business. You got to focus on what your clients are going to need first, and then figure out based on what your clients are wanting, not what you want to offer them, and not because you have you're not going to have the nicest website. I'm sorry, you're not going to have the nicest logo. It's just not going to have the nicest slogan. It's not going to happen. It's going to be, how do you serve people? So, that kind of leads me into the next talking point with you, is when it comes to transitioning and getting speaking gigs. Now, being an athlete, I know this personally, being an athlete or someone that has worked in sports gets your name out there, but it doesn't actually get the deal signed. It doesn't actually get the contracts written up. How are you able to cross that bridge to now you're able to jump out of the industry as like just athletics and say, look, I can go talk to just a business owner, anybody that's doing anything, and I can serve that community as well?
Well, I think first of all, I had to get some street cred into the business community.
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
like, I had to have some business success, right? I got some business success from that business. I bought a franchise called 1-800-GOT-JUNK, and I built Phoenix
I've heard
up.
of them.
I built the Phoenix area up to like 32 franchise areas and sold that off for some profit. Wasn't a massive windfall, but certainly did well there.
Yeah.
And then I've started like 12 businesses, right, in
Yeah.
total. So I got I went to the school of hard knocks on business, man, and shipping. I was in the oil and shipping business, and that's like a dog eat dog. Like, and this is where I think people don't really know how business is tough, and it is a tough world. And there are a lot of things that you learn from athletics that you're like, hey, man, you better, one, get a coach, because the best in the world have a coach. Why wouldn't you have a coach? Like, get some people around you that are going to really help you, because you got to have world beaters around you. When I was in the shipping business, that's a highly litigious business. One of the first hires I had was a maritime attorney that was a baller, and I went up against a case against a significant Fortune 100 brand on a case over a contract disagreement. Won the case, and then they went and hired my maritime attorney to go up against a Fortune 10 oil company. Like, hey man, like, this is who you surround yourself with. And when we're talking about these business things, Aswan, when people are thinking about like, hey, I've done a lot of things with other people's money. I've sold in the product before I've actually built the product, because I see the vision, I see the need, and I always ask, as you're going to be a business owner, there's always these 4 questions. And I learned this from one of my good mentors, guy named Don Hanna, Daryl Hannah's father, the actress. He was a longtime mentor of mine, and passed away a couple of years ago. He would say, hey, there's 4 questions. Like, is there a need? Is the need being filled? Is there money in it? And can you get paid? Those are 2, 4, because any one of those 4 things falls short. This is not a business. You're going to fire up and spend a lot of energy for a hobby or something, man. Because like, if you do there's this big need, and it's not being filled, I'm going to fill it. I see all this money in it, but no one wants to pay for it.
Exactly.
You got a problem, man. Like how will you make that challenge go away? Because you've got to get people to pay. And if there's no money in it, we're not talking there's a business anyway. If the need's already filled and you're going to be the 482nd company to fill the need, I don't know, man. You're really going to have to go after a big market share. And if you're doing cola, like, hey, and you get in the top 10%, you're huge, right? Like you're a giant, but you
Right.
better know your markets and see what's going on. But I see companies that start that there's not even a need, and they just think like, well, I have a need, so I'm doing it. And I'm like, well, no one else has this need, like so. Those are some questions I always think about as I'm developing ideas, and my mind's constantly turning, man. And I appreciate you giving the strength coaches a shout out, man. It is a long, stringent area to be in. The hours are long, and I tell a lot of people as one that the physiology degree was really important to me. How to stay healthy. I'm 54 years old. I'm a pretty healthy guy, right? And but I probably needed a degree in psychology, right? Like, I mean, the weight room is where we go as athletes, right? When you're having that day, you go to the weight room and you're like, man, I'm going to move some iron. I got to work this thing out, and
Yeah.
it's all in your head. And so they're talking to the strength coaches. So the front office who underestimates the impact that person will have on their organization
Yeah.
is a huge error. Huge error.
I learned that early. I played with some pretty great and some great programs like you. I was voted captain of those teams, and as close as we got with the strength coach, that has been the missing, because again, X's and O's, dime a dozen. It's going to be at the end of the day, it's going to be about who shows up on the field and who can outlast someone for 4 quarters or 9 innings in your world. And that is an important part, because when you talk about that flip to business, you gotta be very, you gotta have a lot of stamina. All right. You gotta have a lot of stamina if you're gonna stay in this world. There's a lot of people that do a lot of startups and they talk a lot of shit, but they do not make it. And when it comes to, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about your book a little bit, because when it comes to all of the speaking gigs that you've had, where you're a TEDx speaker as well, of all the people that you've touched, now you've been able to get it condensed into one book, which I know from experience as well is going to be a challenge in itself. Can you speak on how you were able to kind of organize your thoughts to the point where now, look, I have this experience with this company I started, I had this experience as a baseball coach, I had this experience, as a parent, even I had this experience as a player with Nick, like you had been mentioned, Nick Saban, how do you get it now to the point where you could put a book out and say, this is what I'm hanging my hat on, this is where I'm going to plant my flag, and kind of build something around this book?
Yeah, so there's probably three things that are probably big in that, and I appreciate, it is a lot. You're like an author of like 3 books or
Yeah,
something, right? So
exactly.
like,
Right.
it's a huge undertaking, and like first of all, um, big shout out to Wiley Publishing. I mean, Wiley's my publisher. They did a great job, and I'm a first time author, so they were kid gloves with me, kind of managing things, great editing, because they know I'm not the best writer in the world for sure. So there was a lot of things around there that had to go right. I think when you talk about the perseverance of things,
Mhm.
you've gone through so much strategy in baseball. I love that people believe baseball is a boring game, because baseball is so strategic. There are so many things and moving parts that are happening every single second. And strategy is at the highest level. It's really high.
But that's why
And
it's like that, though, because the normal fan doesn't see that. The
that's
normal
right. They don't
fan
understand. They want action. And I
likes seeing
appreciate that. I
numbers.
love hockey, man. I love hockey. Like, and most fans go to hockey and go, this is awesome. Like, I don't really understand how the offside blue line thing works, but
Exactly.
like, it was action for like 20 minutes. And then we go get beer and hot dogs. And then Aswan and I get back in our seat and it's more 20 minutes action, like, and they're fighting and stuff. It's great.
That's
And
exactly the way
so,
it is. Well, shout out to I'm in Florida now, so but shout out to the Panthers, man. I've been
shout out my boy
yeah,
Bobrovsky, man. Like
yeah,
Bobrovsky, Bob's the guy, man. My son's a Bob guy. He's a goalie, and
yeah.
he's all about the Bob, man. Like, and great show for all the Panthers. Well deserved after going to a cup and then coming back the next year to win it, and just falling short. And I think that brings us back to that baseball thing. It's a long, arduous marathon, and it's tough. And and you're also in this setting
Mhm.
of where it's a David and Goliath story, right? Like, you go up to bat, there's a pitcher, you have no idea what they're going to throw, 7 of his friends on defense behind him, plus a catcher. All these things are going. It's really 1 versus 9. And if you're successful 30% of the time, you make $10 million a year, right? So it's a pretty crazy environment of the best in the world at this thing.
Mhm.
And as most people know, the skill of hitting a baseball with a round bat is extremely challenging, and you can't. It's a tough gig, and so for anyone who sits out there and goes, "Hey, like I'd like to try this," like it's really hard at that level. So that perseverance is tied to that, and how I got into organizing the book was because of the strategy of baseball, putting, the innings together, putting chapters, like how you're going to work your strategy throughout an entire game and the setup of it. And then in a company, I'm a member of the Entrepreneurs Organization. So if you have a EO, YPO Gold, like these grades are fabulous for business owners and founders and presidents. And man, this peer-to-peer network, one of the things you do is you do a lifeline, and you kind of tie in like these things that are tough in your life and that happen, and we all have those things. And then there's these celebrations of like your children being born and getting the college scholarship and winning a world championship and all these things, these epiphany moments, selling a company, right?
Yeah.
And making the grade to the corner suite. There's all these things that we do. And so when you write that lifeline, I really kind of use that lifeline of the game and all the learnings inside it to shape the book. And then at the end of each chapter, I have the pain exchange, which is the TEDx talk, right? Now you've read some things about this subject. Now it's your turn for the pain exchange. Will you do the exercise and take on the discipline of putting this into how this shapes into my life? Not into Aswan's life, not into Trent's life, not into, her life, into your life, because you got to own this thing and shape this thing. And I think that there's a lot of people out there right now that are looking for everyone else, right, to do something. Someone come and save me. Like, not going to happen. Right. And I love the quote, you are responsible for your results. And so this is where we have to take ownership in that. And so that pain exchange is a big deal for the chapters. Really important.
If you had to pick a takeaway that you would want readers to get, whether it's the athlete that's reading it or even the parent or someone that maybe knows an athlete or even a business owner, what would it be? And I ask you that because nowadays, and I actually remember it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I'm in Florida. So I went to a USA football convention in Orlando, and it was said that the game is under attack. And I was thinking that USA football is part of the reason the game's under attack, because you have kids that are specializing in just one sport. You have parents that are holding kids back and say, reclassing and saying that, okay, just because you're a football guy, I'm going to hold you back a year. And they're not trying out. The kids aren't as active as they used to be. Like you mentioned, baseball, basketball, football, soccer, tennis, and I'm always an advocate of a young man or woman trying out every single sport and not just specializing in one sport. So how do you kind of address that issue when it comes to the people that dive into your work?
Yeah, I think one is I believe now more than ever, we're charged to know a lot of information. I think it's a great time for me, Aswan, because I am the astute generalist, right? I am not this big specialist, except for in a couple things, right? I really know strength and conditioning. I really know a couple different things. And so, but as a guy who's run 13 different brands and basically like 8 different verticals, and I coach companies all over the world in industry agnostic, right? Manufacturing, accounting, you name it, healthcare. It doesn't matter for me what the team is, because when I'm looking at the team, we're laying the system over the team. It's a business operating system of communication and execution is what we do. And so when teams get that right, there's a couple things I really want people to get that they learn from sports that they can apply to anywhere in their life.
Right.
And the coaching is a big part of it, because feedback becomes so important about how you learn to take and hyper learn is what athletes do. We are very good at hyper learning. We take a bunch of information and we get coached in it and we get reps on that very fast. And then we get adaptability. And that's a huge thing. And then we also get this ability to take in information very quickly and not only bring it in, but actually now execute on what we have to do with that information. So there's a lot of people who can process the information, but they don't have the ability to execute on A, B, and C. They're like, oh, I can do A really well. It's like a triathlon, right? Like, well, I can swim super.
Yeah.
I don't know how to ride a bike, and I'm not a good runner. Like, well, I don't like your chances in this thing, right? You got to be able to do multiple things, and we have to become that. Those skills have to be worked on. So hyper learning is absolutely a skill to be mastered early. And this is where I get worried, Aswan, is like I feel like our schools are letting us down in this. They're not holding us to that higher standard. Because when you look at special forces, pro athletes, and entrepreneurs, man, they are all hyper learners. And the only way you progress in those spaces is that if you're not a hyper learner, you won't survive. So that becomes big. The second one is the best in the world, right? The best in the world, we talked about that earlier, have a coach. But the best in the world also have one thing internally that most don't, and that is self-discipline. They're not saying, hey, I'll be disciplined because Aswan says I need to be. Coach Aswan's going to stand over me and make sure that I do my stuff. You're going to teach them how to build some skill sets, some cadence, how they're going to block their schedules out, and how they're really going to become really strong at being big producers, right? They're gonna have big production level. They're gonna be major contributors because they work with you. But if they don't have the self-discipline to put themselves down at night, to eat the right things, to prepare themselves for what's about to happen, I don't like their chances. You can only go so high. So that is probably another absolute gigantic one that I think a lot of people miss.
Now, can you just kind of, just for our listeners as well, just create and tactics or anything that you may be willing to share in terms of creating that hyper learning environment, because you're 1000% right in regards to the way the school system is failing our kids. You can be playing sports. If you try to sit in the back of the class or, kind of hide in the back in sports, you won't last. But in school, you can sit in the back, you can kind of be timid, you could, forget all your assignments and all that, and all of a sudden they're going to pass you and graduate you regardless. But sports requires you to step up because you got to learn, you got to compete, you're going to get in some scuffles. It's all part of the game. You're learning these things. So what are some tactics that you kind of put out there to create that hyper learning environment that you're speaking about?
Yeah, so one is mentoring, right? Like get mentors. And I have people make a list of the top 5 mentors. And literally, if you want to be a football coach, put Nick Saban on the top of your list as a mentor. You're not likely to get him, but listen, you don't know if you don't ask. Yeah. So I tell people to get 5 big names that they think they really, truly admire. And it might be a stretch because what they're going to find out is the top 1% rarely gets asked, hey, could you help me do what you did? Because somebody helped them do what they did. And they're like, hey, I got to pay it forward. Because you know what? When I was coming up, Aswan took me under his wing and he showed me a bunch of things now. And man, like I got to do it because Aswan did it for me. When he was this big successful guy and he's going along and he comes to my aid and says, hey, I like this kid, man. This kid's got some drive. He's got desire. He's willing to do it. Buys me lunch once a month. Like I'll spend the hour and work on this kid and I'll give back just like Don Hanna did for me, just like Nick Saban did for me. All these people did that, right? So I think that's number one. I think number 2 is, the reality is goals are big and I love that. And I love goals, but things happen on the daily, right? And life happens every day. So the key element here is going to be win the day, man. Like how you set up your day, how you start building habits into your day becomes the most important thing. And I think people miss this all the time. They just sit there and go, you know what? I'll put this off. I can get to it later in the week. I can do this. Like get routines that actually produce top production, top results. And so I use the Oak Journal. I use this Oak Journal right there. Daily habits right here. 10-10-10 every morning. 10 minutes of meditation, 10
Yeah.
minutes of reading, 10 minutes of journaling. I'm going to lay out my day, my set. I got gratitude right now. I'm thankful that a man like Aswan, who's a super successful guy, who has me on his show. Like, I've got gratitude in my life. I'm going to sit here and here's my top priorities. And I prioritize my day. If these three things happen, like, other stuff is good to have, but these things have to happen. And when I go into organizations that have like 200 people, you look at that and you start going like, man, 200 people doing the top 3 things that's important to them is a massive deal. Because what happens is all of a sudden, if the 200 people do the top 3 most important things, they get 3,000 things done every week of the most important things. And then, of course, they work 50 weeks a year. So this organization prioritizes the top 150,000 most important things every year, because they set their day up every day to do it. Right. And then they go execute on that. And so what I call those companies is the top 5%.
Yeah.
No one's going to compete against them because they know how to prioritize and they execute on it and complete it. And people, when they're looking for leading winning teams, you want people who will come into your system and understand the importance and value inside that. And when they get that and they see a culture of people having fun, because as one, we've been both on really good teams.
Yeah.
And good teams are hard. It's a bunch of work, and it's a bunch of going through the grinder to win championships. Is that fair?
1,000%.
Okay, so when you won it, have you ever looked back on one of those great teams you were on and regretted the workload?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's
no one regrets working hard.
It gets me through my morning. Every single morning gets me through my day. It's just the amount of the rewarding feeling.
Yep.
To this day, I can memorize every single saying, everything that the coach said, and that feeling. And one of the things that my linebacker coach would tell me all the time, he looked us in the eye and said, "You guys are going through it. It's hot. I get it. You're tired. It's summer workouts." He looked at the field. He said, "There's no better feeling of walking off that field on a Friday night after a win. The lights are, you're seeing your family. There's no better." I'm getting goosebumps. You can't see it, but I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it.
Was he wrong?
He said, right. 1,000.
Was he wrong?
He was not wrong. And that's got us through the next sprint and the next sprint and the next sprint. And he was 1,000% right. You win that game on a Friday night where your family's there, you're proud, your friends. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it because this was the summer. He's talking in the summer. And we like, "Coach, how are we going to get through this?" But when you calmly speak to your boys, and this is actually, I didn't even plan on taking you here, but he brought it up. You bring it out of me, Trent. Like, this is a lesson for when you are teaching, whether it's a player or whether it's an employee, it doesn't matter. When they're going through these things, get them to see that feeling, put them in that place like Coach Gant put me and said, "Look, when you walk off that field on a Friday night, picture, just envision it. Boom, we're ready to go again." It aligns you to say, "I want that. I want that so bad." So really put people in that feeling, man. So you're spot on with everything you're saying. And applying it to these businesses is the part that it's so important, because the turnover and the way we communicate nowadays, it's so hard to keep people loyal to an organization. When you, as a leader, you don't put in the work, you don't do the things that's going to make it so people want to work, like they're looking forward to hearing from you. That's your job as a leader, as a business owner.
Yeah, I think that
you kind of got me excited.
Yeah, as you touch on that, man, it's so important for people to have vision. It's so important for us to build. I love goals. I do love goals. But what I found is I've got goals. I set them. I strive for them. But what I found is when we get process right, we achieve not only that goal, we do it again and again and again. It's like that. It's like those big steps when you see a stoop and you see like the concrete steps, and you look and go, "Wow, that first step is like 15 feet from the house, fully, or the building, and it's full concrete all the way up those 12 steps." And so you've got 12 feet of concrete, 15 feet from the building, because the first step is the foundation. You got to build it to build the other steps on it. And so process is like that. And when I hear people going, "Oh, Aswan," everyone comes to me and goes, "Man, I got a great team." And I'm like, great. Let me see how many aces you have. How many aces do you have in your hand right now to go out and build this winning organization? This organization that's just going to produce high level. And I use the acronym of CARD. I look at their executive team and I go, okay, coachability, adaptability, responsibility, dependability. The 4 IDs. That's why we're called Leadershipity, right? I have all these IDs that we want in our leaders. So I go in and I measure and take a look, interview their top 8 people. I've got 2 who don't have coachability, unwilling to be coached. I already know everything. Just ask me. 2, no adaptability. Nope, we've always done it this way. I've got to do it this way. Throw the blinders on because this is the way it's always been done. 1 who will take no responsibility. Hey, it's Trent's fault. It's Aswan. Like it's in my department, my assistant. Like it's somebody all the time. And then all of a sudden you've got 1 in that group miraculously flew through this organization somehow, and no one will give them anything because they aren't dependable. And you're like, this is who we're going to build a winning organization on? Right. We have 8 team members and we got a bunch of gaps. So we got to shore this up or get the right people who don't have those gaps, because we can't have it on the team at the top because we're modeling and producing that for everybody else.
So, well, first of all, that's a great acronym, and the regular Move Swiftly listeners are not it's not uncommon to have a bunch of acronyms. They've heard quite a few of them, and that's another one for you guys. I did not plan on him saying that. This is the first time hearing it, as you guys are here first time hearing it. So with that being said, I do want to ask you now, when you go to these business owners and you ask for their top performers, what do they normally give you? Is it just the ones that are creating the most sales? Do you generally see as folks who say, okay, I want the top performers? How do they make it so someone becomes a top performer, so they know, all right, when you come in, you're not going to be perfect and we're going to really see how good you actually are and all that stuff?
Yeah. So usually when I'm called in, they're not performing well. Right. And actually a lot of times companies don't even understand what we're measuring. Are we measuring the right things in performance?
Exactly.
Right.
I've seen that.
As we talk about football, right? The last thing, hey, I measured whether Trent was able to take the handoff. Right. Well, I'm going to do that like 30 times. Like, is that a KPI? Right. Like, okay, he didn't fumble the handoff. Like that's
you could do that, right?
Yeah, it's like a minimum standard. So I find a lot of organizations think that they go, oh, this person's performing very well, and then when you dive into it, not really. Yeah. And someone who's really performing well, they don't even know. They don't even know that, wow, this person's hitting on all cylinders. Have you seen some of the accomplishments over here? Because they're not measuring their KPIs. Yeah. And so I'm like, yeah, but why is that department run so smooth? Oh, I don't know. Well, have you looked at what the KPIs are over there that they're managing and operating? Because their person running that organization is running this like a high performing team, measuring exactly the right things, and then communicating exactly what they need from their team, and then going out and executing on that every single day. And they win the days, and they win all 5 of them, and they win the week, and then they start winning the weeks, and then they start winning the months, and then they start winning the months, and they win the quarters, and then all of a sudden it's like, man, they've been performing like 3-4 years over here. Yeah, right. I got it. Because every day they're intentional about how they will communicate and execute, and they do that through simplification and prioritization. That's it.
That's an incredibly valid point. And because you're wearing Under Armour stuff now, it's kind of, I have to bring it up because I bring it up so much on the show. But I grew up in Maryland, and I saw how he built what he's built now, where it's one tight stretchy t-shirts. Now he's got hats, he's got polo shirts and all these things. And a lot of people don't know, he had initially pitched the idea to Nike, and Nike told him it would never work. But he has been on, his name is Kevin Plank, by the way. His name, I mean, he has been on record saying how much he runs this company like a team. and everybody has their role to do. Those KPIs, which stands for key performance indicators, if you guys didn't know, but those KPIs need to be measured every day, and you give people an intentional way to spend their next 24 hours. Without that intention, you're going to run into a problem, because people, look, they're just going to want, how much am I making? If I'm trying to make more, once money starts to become the motivating factor for people coming into their place of work, then you got a huge problem as a business owner. I see it every single day. I've been in fitness, been in athletics, now I'm in education, the most transient industries that you can possibly think of. If they're coming in just thinking about how much I'm making and not how much do I actually impact the clients and the customers, you're going to have a huge problem. And I do want to be very respectful of your time, because I want you to kind of talk a little bit about, is it a group that you're a part of in which you're serving like the 1%? I know you have a podcast and you have a lot of things going on where you're bringing in these specialized groups of people that have this mindset to teach. So I want to kind of give you the opportunity to plug a little bit of plug all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Certainly the book features like over 40 interviews we've had. We've had about 200 interviews on Winners Find a Way. Love that. It's my podcast. Based on the 4 discipline execution quote that I read in there that says, winners, when shown data that they're losing, find a way to win. And man, Aswan, you and I, we've surrounded ourselves with people like this, right? Because we realize like we're not always going to win. And there's going to be people up against us who are also really good at stuff as well, right? And so we're going to have to figure it out along the way. And so we need solution-minded people, and winners find a way. And so we do growth getaways with that, which is like 3 days of mindset, AI, learning how to build a winning team. I'll throw one of the secrets on there as you're talking about teams from the book, Leading Winning Teams, featured all the rings there on the top. And certainly in this, as I look at it,
yeah, that's awesome.
When I looked at it, one of the key things I wanted people to get is that you do need your team members to buy in on what they're doing. And as everybody develops, people want to make more money. And I have got a surefire way to make them more money. If you produce better than 95% other people, and you're the top 5 producer in whatever you're doing, I don't care if whatever it is, you'll get paid. You will get paid. People will find your value, because that's all you do is create value and contribution for organizations. And if someone's not willing to pay you for that, start your own and create your own value and contribution and get paid a lot more than someone else will pay you, right? Because what people can pay you is limited, and what you can make on your own is unlimited. So if you're that good, but I can't see anybody complaining, and I won't hear anybody complaining about what they're making until they can show me how much value they've created for us as an organization, because everybody's always happy to pay when you're creating that contribution and value. And so that's a big one. And I think the other side of this, from a leadership standpoint, as you talk about building, leading, winning teams, one of the things I really want leaders to get is that great ideas come from anywhere. And as people are driving through, you want to know what they want. Help people, help your teammates get what they want. Your team members have ideas. They have goals. They want to get their kids to college. They want to do something. They want to have a house on the lake someday. They're saving for that. Like whatever it is, like put it together for them and understand what they're going for and what motivates them. And then a really good manager, like your coach did for you, shows them, hey, when we do these things, I'm going to show you that result Friday night walking off the field. You're going to meet exactly where you're going to want to be, and you're going to get that feeling, and the endorphins are going to hit your body. And the only thing you're going to think about is, how fast can I repeat this feeling again? Maybe we should practice Sunday, coach, because I'm ready to go, because next Friday, I want this again. And that's what we're thinking about. And when your teammates start thinking like that with you, and we're moving in a direction in alignment, watch out.
Yeah, well, on that point, I teach at this school named the Center for Creative Education, and we are brand new. And I have experience driving buses, and they just actually got a bus. So guess who they asked to drive it and pick up the kids, so we're able to bring in more kids, because you don't want to be at a school like this where you have to have the parents pick them up and drop them off. So that point that you make in terms of adding value is incredible. You never know what it is you can do to add some value. But if you can add value, certifications and all that stuff is great, but adding value to whatever your work situation is going to be huge for you to build your reputation on. And like you said, maybe it might be eventually starting your own thing and creating more features. So all that being said, Trent, the way I close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. Pretend you are the young, just athletic sports guy, that pretend that high school version of you, middle school version of you has come into the Zoom room. Now you are the 54-year-old man who's built all the stuff he's built. Pretend that young man has come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement, and we'll officially close.
Yeah, I think if I could tell my younger self something, right, that I've learned for sure, it would be don't fear. Don't fear risk. I mean, risk is real, and you want to assume that risk and take calculated risks, but get yourself in a position where you can be faithful in something spiritually,
Yes.
because having that spirituality is a big itty, and there's something more important than you. There's a
Mhm.
lot more something important than me, and I know that, and I'm not the most important thing.
Mhm.
And that's a really important thing for a young, successful athlete to get
Mhm.
right out. But building that foundation, realize that you shouldn't fear. You can put your faith in other things and not fear what's happened. This is a time of a lot of disruption, a lot of anxiety. And when we get our foundation right, there's nothing to fear about. And I think that I wish I got that earlier, Swan. I really wish someone would have walked me through that at a younger age.
I have absolutely nothing to add. As you guys know on this show, I'm very rarely at a loss for words, but you covered it well. I'm so glad our paths connected. I'm so looking forward to getting a copy of your book myself and really learning from what you've built. Being a person that heavily involved in sports and teaching these teamwork elements. You always need other allies. You always need other mentors. So again, I appreciate you for coming on here and absolutely, just like I mentioned at the beginning, I told you he was going to set the microphone on fire, and he absolutely delivered. So everyone out there, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.